Good evening. Welcome to our monthly constituent meeting for our district, Chittenden 3. Representative Trevor Squirrel and Representative Edye Graning. We'll just give a couple comments in the front end here, and then we'll have a conversation with folks in the audience. Currently, one folk in the audience. So anyway, I'm my standing committee in the House is appropriations, and the way it works in the legislature is that the House Appropriations Committee starts with the budget first, and we develop that budget, and then we sent that out of the House, I think the end of March. It was the end of March, and goes to the Senate, and the Senate does what the Senate does with the budget, makes changes, disagrees. But also at the same time, in fairness to them, we have a couple more months of understanding where we are financially within the constructs of what we work with. We always do a balanced budget. We do two consensus economic forecasts, one in January, one in July each year. During the pandemic, we were doing them quarterly because things were so much in flux. But the one we did in January basically tells us how much money we have to spend, okay? Even though we know that once January and February comes, we might get updates on that and get a sense that there's more money, we don't spend that money. We might put it into contingent funding for things with the idea that if it is there in July, when we get the next forecast, then we can use it for certain things. So anyways, the Senate just went through their process and just voted it out today. And so what will happen is it'll come back to the House. We take a look at it. We don't really need to look at it because we've been online looking at it. But there'll be a number of differences, not just a single difference that might happen in a particular bill, legislation. And because of that, what we do is we go straight to a committee of conference. And a committee of conference are 3 members of the House Appropriations Committee, 3 members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and they basically get in a room with support staff and hash out the differences. Agree, disagree. It usually takes place over the course of maybe 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the year and how contentious some of those issues are. And the way that, and when there is a conference committee, when it comes back to the House floor, when it goes to the Senate floor, individuals, House representatives and senators can only vote up and down. They can't amend what the conference committee did. So either you agree with what the conference committee did or you disagree. And that's the way the vote takes place. This year's budget for FY24, which starts in July 1, is approximately $8.4 billion. $2.4 billion is general fund. I don't have the rest of it. There's a lot of federal funds that flow into the state, and we have about $500 million in just special funds. Think fees and things like that that you pay for, whether that's, maybe not DMV is not a good choice because there's a separate transportation one, but you know, if you go to get a permit or something like that, a lot of times those fees go into special funds. Anyway, that's sort of where we are in the process. We hope to adjourn in a couple of weeks. I think it might be 3 weeks, but everyone's planning for 2 more weeks of this work. And it very much is a hurry up and wait situation because we got bills moving. We're doing our work with the money piece. But at the same time, we're looking at bills coming through our committee that have money attached to that and making decisions about that. So it'll be a busy time and probably a few late nights, but that's what we signed up for. So.
Yep. Hi, I'm Edye Graning. I am a new legislator for Chittenden 3. I live in Jericho, and I serve on the, what do I serve? I serve on the Committee for Commerce and Economic Development. It's been a little bit of a long week already, so I apologize. And we mainly work on workforce, bank regulations, securities regulations, insurance regulations. And yeah, that's about it. That's what we work on. And we've been working today on renovating, rewriting the laws, so only 70-page law, of the apprenticeship program. It's a federal program that Vermont manages our portion of it, or our state's apprenticeship program, and so it needs a full rewrite, and so we took the law and started over, and we've been working with the Department of Labor on that. So that was today. This is day 3 or 4 that we've been working on that, and it's I'm learning all kinds of really new and interesting things. Getting to ask a lot of really good questions. So
Okay.
that's.
These things are far away from the day-to-day concerns of those of us who live here, but that's what government is really about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's great when we can pass a law that's going to impact folks right away. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
but for the most part, hopefully we're planning for the future and we're kind of making things better incrementally. Sometimes in ways that we don't see, but eventually we do. And yeah, it's been a really great experience so far.
Well, you are concerned in the long run with making Vermont friendly for business.
In my committee?
Yeah.
So my committee looks at the Vermont workforce and Vermont businesses and how do we strengthen that sector. So it's not necessarily making Vermont friendly for business. It's what are the right businesses for Vermont and how do we ensure that we're supporting them well?
Mhm.
And how do we ensure that we're incentivizing those businesses? And what are we missing? That's a lot of what we do. And then workforce development, how do we make sure that that Vermonters coming through our education system are getting educated appropriately so that they can be, part of the workforce in the future.
Yeah. I have a friend who is the senior faculty member at Vermont Tech, and don't get him started in terms of, he is very concerned because he says we can employ every one of our graduates, and people don't appreciate what we're producing and what it does for the state.
Yeah, in January, we had about 23,000 open jobs in the state and about 8,000 people looking for work. So, I don't have up-to-date numbers on that, but it's a good market for a job seeker right now. We need more workers.
And part of that also is making sure that folks have the right skill set.
Sorry?
That folks have the right skill set,
Yeah.
the right
Yeah.
training. And there's been a lot of investments, partly because of all the federal money that's come in over the last couple of years, to help with training programs and apprenticeship programs. We've invested quite a lot of money into our state school system, and actually upped our appropriations to the University of Vermont. And I don't think a lot of folks understand that you could go to CCV, basically tuition free, and get an associate's degree. And and the income thresholds for gaining access to that are quite high. And so those are the kinds of things we're also doing.
Yeah.
Those kinds of
In the
investments.
budget this year, I think we set it up for the Vermont State College system, which
Yeah.
CCV is part of.
Yeah.
So that if a family makes up to $75,000 a year, so this is if the budget passes, right,
Yeah.
starting in the fall, then the student can go to school for free, which is pretty great to be able to get a degree. So it's, the program was so successful with CCV that we broadened it.
Yeah.
Does immigration affect this whole picture? And do we have enough immigrants? And does that affect at all what you do?
We talk about it a lot, actually, in our committee. We have a really we have a more robust program than we did before, program to welcome new Americans into Vermont. We have a program in Burlington and I think in Brattleboro, I think. And there are a couple of other smaller areas, but
My impression is that we have fewer immigrants than we used to.
I haven't seen any data to that effect, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's not true.
during COVID, the numbers slowed down.
Yeah.
So,
The,
I don't know that that's a fair assessment because I think the last couple years have been unusual.
very,
Yeah, we did have in-migration of folks over the last couple of years, not migrants, but folks that realized, oh, I can remotely work from a place I would like to be in.
I go down to New York and whenever I meet young people, I say, come to Vermont. But of course, then there's the whole housing thing that we talked about at a meeting earlier this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that's driven so much by those kinds of folks. I think the problems are the last 20 years not doing the right things for housing,
Yeah.
right? And investors going into the market and picking up, I think, VRBOs and Airbnbs and things like that. I don't think folks that have come in just to work here and buy a house are our biggest problem, in terms of that piece of it. But we're investing a lot of money in housing. I'm going to say it's $100 million in this budget rendition. I might be wrong with that, but I don't think I'm too far off from that.
I don't remember the
Because I
number.
know there's at least $50 to $70 million going to VHCB. So,
Yeah.
and I know there are housing kinds of activities. Yeah, the whole housing, whether it's housing for purchase, whether it's fixing houses for rental, we certainly have a significant issue around homeless folks and so-called hotel motel program that being phased out because of lack of federal funds to support that, but it's still a real issue, so.
Yeah. But one runs into people who are saying, in Jericho, our children can't afford to live in Jericho. And this doesn't apply to me. I wish it did.
No, yeah.
I wish they wanted to move back, but they don't.
Yeah, the median price of a home in Jericho and Underhill is quite high. I don't know our ranking in the state, but I think it's in the top 5.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well,
as you know, not so much in Underhill, I don't think I've really had this conversation. But there's been a lot of discussion in Jericho
oh, yeah.
around providing affordable housing, however you want to structure that conversation. And sort of pointing to how regulation and things like that have sort of not allowed some of this other housing to be there. Of course, we have a housing bill now that's working its way through. It's a Senate bill, but it's on the House side now. Trying to find that line, because there are elements in that bill, in that legislation, that's going to come down and say, you municipality, if you allow a single-family home, you have to allow a duplex, right? And you can't set up stuff that basically prevents that from
Prohibits,
happening
right.
in reality. That creates tension, of course, when you start telling municipalities what they should be doing. Yeah, we don't know where that housing bill is going to go. There's an Act 250 piece of that. People are trying to rethink that a little bit, and although I personally believe that a lot of our problems are not attached to Act 250, there are other elements there. But there are some things that we probably could do to make it work a little bit better in the long term. But, yeah.
Well, right out where is it? Right out here is where we would build more dense housing. And I think the problems are more sewage and that sort of thing there.
Infrastructure can be a problem, but it's also, let me just tell you a little story.
Yeah.
When I was chair of the planning commission in Underhill, we went through a rewrite of the town regs. And we wanted to modify, amongst some other things, we wanted to modify the zoning for the flats, at least on the Underhill side. And we were talking to Jericho, but we weren't gonna make, they needed to do their own thing. And you know the Jacobs property that's behind the church and the firehouse and
Yeah.
what's called the Jacobs property? A lot of it's been sold off now, particularly the houses up on the hill. We had thought about changing some things to make it easier for folks to build, right? And so in more dense kinds of, and we built this into the regulations, and there's a lot of support for it. And a couple weeks before we went to a vote, we got a couple of folks out there that got on Front Porch Forum and raised holy heck and fed a bunch of misinformation, and it lost by 26 votes. And it never got back, and like, it would have been great, because you probably could have had a couple of hundred units. We're talking small units, townhouses and senior, it was a mixed setup, and it was ideal. So anyway, my story. So there are folks out there that work against that sometimes.
I think unfortunately, there are a lot of people in town, in both towns, who don't recognize when people have studied something and know more about it, and you come up with something and they just see one angle of it and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably all kinds of stories about the work that volunteer committees and commissions do, and go through the public process and
Yeah.
warn meetings and do all those kinds of things, do the outreach, to have people at the last minute come, I didn't know anything about this. But anyway, you're taking me down another rabbit hole.
Well, I have two things that are
Okay.
not
Go ahead.
really related to this. One of which is, you may have seen on Front Porch Forum, there were 3 of us who wrote letters about a bypass of Route 15. Did you see that? One of them was in January.
I have seen them, but I'm not familiar. But apparently there's a conversation that's been ongoing before that, about that, right?
Yeah, the first one was, we should bypass Underhill Flats and Jericho Corners, and Route 15 should, and that would make both of these sections of town much more livable, which was a great idea. And the second letter said, a little bit of history here. We tried this 50 years ago, and and nothing ever came of it. So I wrote a letter saying, well, thinking of Burlington and how the connector is going into Burlington, and that's taken 40 years. And I'm thinking, we should use this to our advantage and say, okay, 50 years from now, we're gonna run Route 15, and I have my own route that I thought, which would be almost a straight line from just this side of Silly Hill Road up this way to just about John Leo's, straight line that would go behind the foothills. And I wrote a letter saying the biggest barrier is NIMBY, is not in my backyard. And you may have seen at Gay Symington's house, there's a sign that says YIMBY. So I wrote a letter saying, the biggest barrier is NIMBY. But if we take advantage of, if we assume that it's going to be 50 years before it's going to be built, it won't be my backyard then. And if we build in some compensation such that if you go to somebody and say, look, a road is going to go through here in 50 years, and here's some compensation if you build into your into the sale that people understand that the road is going to come there. So you compensate people, but move it out far enough so that it is my backyard, but it's not my backyard because I won't be here in 50 years. That sort of thing. And my contention is the problem is not, the traffic problem is not unworkable now, but if we get a 50-year start on it, by the time it becomes unworkable, it will be underway. Do you have thoughts?
I do. What about the environmental considerations?
Those would have to be dealt with. We'd have 50 years to do it.
Yep, but the habitat segregation, I'm not using the right word, fragmentation is the word I want, that would take place, can't mitigate that, right? I mean, some of the other things I understand what you're saying, you probably could address. That would be my concern. I mean, or you asked my thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly that would be one that would come up for me. Think about the Cirque Highway and what happened, and much of its problems was related to environmental issues. But I don't disagree, but some of that stuff can be mitigated, but I don't know if it all can. That's just my thoughts, that's all.
Well, I grant you that there are a lot of environmental issues.
I guess I would take it a different way. If your concern is the traffic, then what kind of public transportation would make more sense to set up? Like I would go a totally different route because I don't live on Route 15, so I don't have traffic concerns in my yard or in my, so that's not an issue for me. But the problem that you're trying to solve is your concern about the traffic on the road cutting through the town, and maybe it's not making a different route for the traffic. Maybe it's a different type of traffic. And if there is a public transportation system that is, a monorail or something like that, that gets people, and I'm just making things up here, but that gets people into Burlington in a different way, that's electric, that's, different things like that. Like maybe that solves more problems. So I just, that's my gut reaction is, I'm not sure there's a problem that needs to be solved, and I think that it's going to create a lot more problems than, I would want to look at it from a number of different ways.
Okay.
So so you asked for what's my reaction? That's my first reaction, having never thought about it before.
Well, I want to raise the issue. I am no expert, but I do not think the automobile is going to be, I don't think the automobile is going to be alienated from our lives, even in 50 years. We can't even bring a modern train into Vermont. I don't see how we would ever think of a monorail or any public transportation besides buses. And the problem with that is people are going to be coming from all over the northern part of the state. They're already doing it. And there's a lot of building going on in Morrisville, And as we talked about at the end of one of our recent meetings, I think that there's going to be a new industry springing up around the bike path, which is going to be terrific for the northern part of the state. And if the northern part of the state develops economically, the northern part of the state also being the counties, the rare counties in the United States that are going to be benefiting from global warming. You know, they've said that Lamoille County is probably the most blessed county in the states because of global warming. And I think that the population's going to increase, but I don't even see in what's being proposed for here any bus system that's going to get people to give up their cars. Nor do I see how it's really very practical unless you had a bus leaving every 15 minutes, which is inconceivable. I don't see how people from here would really use the bus to go downtown except for the commuter bus. So,
Yeah. If
To
it's a
me-
50-year project, I think there are a lot of, a lot of things to be thought through.
yeah,
So-
and that's why a 50-year project is the right way to undertake it. So that was one thing,
Okay.
and I don't have answers to that. The other thing is, if I can, in New York City and also in Europe, I'm on the energy task force, sort of. I don't go very often, but one of the things that I think that we could do as a state is require any house being sold to post its insulation status. If we've been looking at housing in New York City, and the big apartment buildings have something like this, and in the European Union, all houses sold, each house has to have a grade, and so that if you're automatically getting that information, it shows the value of insulation for the house.
Yep. That could be part of a clean heat standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's consumer information, right? And,
Yeah. But required.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know that that's a bad idea. I think it's got merit. And so folks can use that as another piece of criteria in determining whether to buy this
Yep.
home versus this home. And my question is, how reliable is that testing, and how does that work? What are the logistics of it?
Well, it would probably be the blow door test
Yeah.
that they are doing pretty regularly.
So what would be the cost to do just that? Let's say I wanted someone to come out to do that so I could put that on my ad.
Probably a couple $100.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I think is on we got a bill going, no, it's not, know what it is. I also chair the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. We oversee all the rulemaking for departments and agencies in the state. And we have a rule coming through now on building standards, heating and stuff like that, so, building codes. So it'll be interesting. Be interesting to bring this up to some of those folks and see what they have to say about it.
I will, I'll send you this. This
Yeah.
is the Irish one.
Are you saying multiple countries in Europe are doing that?
The whole European Union, as far as I know, we
Do they mandate it or suggest?
Yeah,
They mandate it?
mandated. And you see, this house fits there, and so it's readily, I mean, you just take a look at it and you can see where you stand.
Yeah.
And it's
I think
very
there's, yeah,
useful.
there's a lot of value to that. I would, you know, yeah, with the way we're looking at weatherization and, you know, more resources being put there, I could see that being a piece of it.
Yeah.
So, again, cost and implementation, and it takes time and all of that, but I think it's a really, it fits with Vermont's goals, it fits with our values, it fits with all kinds of things. So,
Yeah. Well, I'll
Yeah.
send you this thing and
Yeah, you think about how something like that might play into like S5 or
Right,
the clean heat standard,
right,
because, you know, you've got these obligated parties, these are the fuel dealers and those
Yeah.
folks, and supposedly out there going to help people weatherize or put heat pumps in or upgrade
Yeah.
electrical systems. I mean, it could be a service that they offer, even though it might be not be mandated, doesn't necessarily have to be mandated.
Yep.
Can be, say, some, you know, I'll run this test for you, and you can use that to sell your home or something like that, you know? So, there is value in that, for sure. Just not sure where that would plug in or how that might work.
good.
Any other great ideas?
yeah.
Not at the moment.
Or do either of you have questions while we're here? No?
All right, then I think we can probably call this to a close this evening.
Yeah, I think if folks want to reach us, email is probably the best way, and the legislative email is first letter of the first name, full last name, at ledge.state.bt.us,
Yep.
and so it's the best way to get in touch. Trevor's probably faster at answering email than I am, but occasionally I'll get it on the same day, so, you know, we try.
Yeah, and
Next.
if you don't remember that, you can always go to the legislative webpage and look for either one of us, and our emails are there, so.
And the next 2 weeks will be busy, and then it'll be less busy,
Less
maybe,
busy.
maybe. Sorry for knocking on the microphone.
No problem.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much.
Thanks,
Thank
Roger.
you.